There is a weight of evidence now internationally that shows that actually returning bison and returning large grazing animals to these habitats does increase the soil carbon.
Welcome to The Switch. I'm Elena Casas. European bison are the continent's heaviest wild land animal. Almost hunted to extinction in the early 20th century, they survived in captivity and have since been reintroduced to several European countries. They are not native to Britain, but they closely resemble an extinct species that was. In July 2022, they were introduced into Woodland in the south of England in a historic rewilding project. Paul Haddaway is Director of Conservation at the Kent Wildlife Trust, and he joins me now. Paul, why did you choose to introduce bison?
It's a very good question. First of all, that re prefix is probably not particularly helpful when we have the broader conversation about bison. They were in the fossil record. We can see fossil record of steppe bison in the UK around the time of the last ice age, but that's not the reason. It's not bringing back a species that was formerly here. It's about choosing the right animal for the right job. And the motivator for us was actually to regenerate some of our woodland areas in Kent, which have been traditionally managed in a very intensive way, a very carbon intensive way, chainsaws, brush cutters, tractors, in order to replicate conditions that actually traditionally or originally would have been created by having these large animals, these big herbivores in that woodland. We don't have those species anymore. Our native grazing stock are not bred to do that. So missing that big proxy species, that big aurochs, which was our wild cattle of Britain and Europe in the last ice age, missing those species, we need to look for something that would do the job. So we went to the continent and we found it.
So the bison are filling an ecological gap that has been empty in Britain and much of Western Europe for centuries.
Yeah, less so in Western Europe because they held on for quite a long time there, but absolutely in the UK. And they are this ecosystem engineer, this keystone species. So what they do, the way that they dynamically manage these woodland areas, the size of them, the shape, the behaviour, all the things that brings, creates this very, very dynamic set of micro-ecosystems. Track back 15,000 years and pre-people managing those woodlands, the reason those species are in the woodlands in the first place is because these big herbivores were crashing through, doing all of this for us. So what we're seeing is paths being created through the woodland that are sort of 1 bison wide, then become 2, 3, 4 bison wide. Those in turn are perfect areas for pioneer plant species to come into and begin to populate on the edges. We're seeing this dust bathing behaviour, which again our domestic animals don't do, which is creating space for pioneer plants, for reptiles. We've got lizards, slow worms, grass snakes on the site. We hope eventually to put sand lizard back into those sites. You're seeing invertebrates using that. So it creates all of the conditions you need for a dynamic landscape that's naturally managed through natural process rather than our intervention.
The animals' varied eating habits also enrich the soil, and studies show it may be sequestering more carbon.
There is a weight of evidence now internationally that shows that actually returning bison and returning large grazing animals to these habitats does increase the soil carbon. We're seeing it. There was data published recently about the herds in the Carpathians doing the equivalent to a year's worth of American car manufacture. So there's a lot of evidence out there that talks to this.
Species reintroduction projects have been controversial across Europe. While resettling efforts have allowed wolf populations to bounce back in Germany and Switzerland, and bears in the Pyrenees, they are often seen as directly in competition with farming for food.
I think it's about space. All of this is about scale and space. If we still had a land bridge to Europe, we would have wolves in East Anglia, we would have wolves and lynx in southern Britain. So the only thing that's preventing that is the fact we've got the channel between us. The byproduct of that is that we've forgotten what it's like to live with large animals in our landscape. And so people have got to kind of relearn that connection to wildlife and the fact that actually we can coexist.
Are you attempting at least partly to restore the biodiversity that existed in Britain before industrial agriculture?
I think that has to be the aspiration. So again, this is a really interesting conversation within conservation. With that, you then get a layering of climate resilience within those landscapes because they're able to adapt in a more natural way than we can adapt as human intervention and managers of those sites. So scale's the answer to everything, but also just a different mindset in how we think and being prepared to accept that there will be changes. So we may lose certain species, but we're going to gain others.